Hi, everyone. This is Dan LeBlanc. I am the CEO of Daasity, and I am here with Chris Shimojima, and we are having a fireside chat hosted by Looker. Really excited about this, talking about the impact to direct-to-consumer businesses in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. Chris, tell me a little bit about yourself and your sort of experience in direct-to-consumer.
Well, thanks, Dan. Good to be here. So I started my career in consumer packaged goods as a brand manager. And then I shifted into digital now over 20 years ago. So over the past 20 years, I had digital leadership responsibility for brands like Sears, Kmart, Nike, and then provide commerce that operated several direct-to-consumer brands like ProFlowers, Red Envelope, and Shari's Berries. And Dan, you want to do a quick background of yours?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I used to work for Chris at Provide Commerce, running all of the consumer analytics. And for the last 3 years, I've been the CEO of Daasity, which is a Looker partner. And we're really focused on helping these direct consumer brands become much more data-driven. And the last 6 months have really been interesting with everything going on. So Chris, tell me, you've been working with a large number of direct consumer brands over the last number of years. What are you seeing as a result of COVID-19 and this kind of crazy shift that we've been seeing in towards digital commerce?
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise here. I think every brand is experiencing the same thing, which is this massive shift to digital in everything they're doing, right? So whether it's marketing, whether it's product management, whether it's service, the huge kind of uptick in terms of consumers' migration to everything digital. And I think it's taken a lot of the brands, especially those brands who are very wholesale centric, by surprise. And I think they're scrambling to figure out, hey, what's their new offense as this migration to digital or amplification of digital commerce is kind of accelerating. I think one in particular is how a lot of these wholesale centric businesses has been mostly Amazon reliant as their digital strategy. And as you know, I think there's been some issues with Amazon during the COVID in terms of non-essential products. And those brands that fell into that category saw their Amazon business basically freeze overnight. And I think they're now, recognizing that potential opportunity to start thinking about digital in a much more broader context, not just limited to Amazon, whether it's their own brand.com, whether it's working with their wholesale partner to amplify their .com businesses, whether it's marketing. So yeah, I think it's really a interesting happening with the result of COVID. How about you, Dan? I mean, are you seeing any of the Daasity merchants kind of going through the similar kind of experience? What are you seeing?
Yeah, Chris, it is very interesting. I mean, first and foremost, we're seeing really mixed results depending upon the merchants. Probably about 50% are having some of the most amazing times that they've had historically, even better than, historically the holiday season. So outpacing Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Christmas, and having these incredible months. And then we're seeing about 25% that are essentially flat. And then you've got another quarter that are really struggling and down significantly. But what's interesting is both they're really lumped in by the type of category. So things like home and fitness and wellness and skincare are doing really well. And things like apparel and accessories and beauty, where it's really people being out and being social, are really, really struggling. So it's a little bit of a have and have not. The real question for a lot of these merchants, though, is how long is this going to change? Is it a permanent thing? Or as retail started to open, and now as this kind of, as we go through summer and maybe things are starting to close again, it creates a bit of uncertainty for these merchants. And so the longevity of whether this is a temporary change or a permanent change is really interesting. And I agree with you on the Amazon side. We had a number of merchants that got shut out of Amazon, and they're really having to rethink whether or not Amazon is really their friend or not their friend. And so we've been telling our merchants, you've got to really rethink your product strategy. You've got to think about, do you put everything on Amazon, or do you limit what's on Amazon to try and drive people to your brand? And then lastly, we just see a lot of really exciting things going on in the direct consumer space, especially in the digital space. So there is an announcement between Shopify and Walmart.com. So now if you're on Shopify, you always had the ability to list your products on Amazon and also in Pinterest and Facebook just within that platform. But now you can you can actually add your products to be on Walmart.com. And as we see those shifts, that is tremendous for a lot of our merchants that are on Shopify, because it gives them an avenue into these other ecosystems that are really gaining in popularity and being able to compete against the Amazons of the world. So Chris, as you said, and as I've said, there's a lot of things going on that we've seen these merchants encounter. What are you telling the brands that you work with to do in light of all these changes?
Yeah, I think one in particular, Dan, I think is, this is my hypothesis, right? So I think during the COVID kind of stay at home, brands really succeeded or failed based on how quick they were to addressing kind of marketplace changes. And as a result of that, I think there were a lot of kind of brand switching that happened, because some of the brands, they disappointed their customers, and some really excelled in delivering against safety and meeting the needs of the consumer. And I think, my hypothesis is that you come out of this COVID, I think consumers are going to be looking for brands they could really believe in. And, what I kind of like to use the word soulful connection with a consumer. I think brands that are able to really create that kind of a soulful connection with the consumer is going to be the one that's going to win. And so the question is, how do you do that? And I think one of the key elements of that, I think, is to be able to really understand who your most important consumers are. And I think it's, unfortunately, and I do work with quite a bit of brands, and I think one of the common issues I face with a lot of brands today is they don't really have a clear perspective on who their most important consumer are. And I think this understanding of the proper segmentation, I think, is really important, and really kind of driving deep into what is the needs and the behaviors, and more importantly, what are the kind of the passion points of these consumers are that's going to really drive their brand. So that's one thing. I think the other piece that I'm very passionate about, that I've been kind of talking to a lot of brands about, is having a real comprehensive strategy around digital. And we touched on this already, right? For those brands who have been basically treating Amazon as their digital strategy, they have to think much more broader. Don't get so focused on Amazon. Think about how to create a more healthy, expansive digital ecosystem that includes their own brand.com. How do you work with wholesale clients to really amplify their .com businesses? And then from the standpoint of operational side of it, really understanding how to actually spend the money properly into digital medium, sales. How do you actually use digital to actually create a better sales experiences, service, operations, whatever it might be. So I think those are some very important kind of operational specific recommendation or thoughts that I've been kind of sharing. The other piece I think is important is, and I think this is really clear as we went through this kind of 3.5 months of kind of pandemic-driven stay-at-home, is how important speed and the brand's ability to adapt to marketplace, the agility, is becoming more important. To give you an example, one of the businesses I sit on the board of is a cosmetic business. They've been able to come out to the marketplace in 4 weeks, from concept to product delivery into the hands of the consumer, a hand sanitizer that's infused with rose water. And overnight, that product became the best-selling product on their .com. So speed to market is beneficial. And now the question is, how can you now adapt that kind of a mode of operation into day-to-day operation? I think will be really important, the speed. And then lastly, the reason that we co-founded Daasity, Dan, is how important data has become to really making the proper decision, business decision, better, faster, more agile. And I think that becomes more important as we go into the COVID-19, post-COVID-19 era. So those are some of the four key kind of common themes that I've been sharing with the brands I work with. How about you, Dan? I mean, as you are very close to data with Daasity, what are you seeing with your clients as they adopt data-driven analytics and business thinking? What are some of the key themes you're hearing?
Yeah, Chris, yeah, it's really interesting. So I think first is we're seeing that a lot of brands, a lot of merchants are making kind of they're making a binary decision on being data-driven. They either recognize that this has to be a core competency and you have to use it and excel at it, or they've decided that they're not really going to invest any resources at all. And I think in the past, people used to want to become data-driven, but not necessarily make it a priority. And we're seeing more and more of that prioritization. And a lot of that really comes back to what you were stating about the speed and the agility to be able to make decisions because things are shifting so fast. And so those that are really making it a decision are really making investments into becoming data-driven. And that's through working with companies like ourselves and Looker, giving them that kind of capability. One of the things so there's a couple of areas that we're finding people are really now digging into much more so than they used to be. First is really on the sales channels. So as you mentioned, you're starting to see a lot more of companies going towards brand.com. They're selling on marketplace, and they're really wanting to understand the impact of the marketing with that kind of non-direct click. Amazon will go in and you can now advertise on Amazon. You can now advertise, and you advertise on Google. And we know that most consumers, when they see an advertisement, one of the places that they go look is on Amazon to see if that product is there. And so it's not just about trying to understand the specific sales channel and where those orders are coming from, but really looking at your business holistically. How do I compare all the different sales channels and understand that within the context of all of the marketing that I'm doing so that I can shift quickly if need be and allocate quickly if I need be. And that goes in hand with attribution. So we all know that what you get, data that you get at a Facebook or Google Ads or whatever advertising platform you're on, though they are giving you data that is really driving to make them look really good and to spend more money. And merchants have become wise to that and really thinking about the attribution and having their own viewpoint. So how do I compare things like a first click versus a last click versus a self-reported so that I can take the decision-making to my own hands and think about how I'm marketing and making those decisions myself based upon what I know. What's interesting is, so one of the other areas that's interesting for us is being able to see a lot more on sort of retail performance and the impact on digital. So stores have closed. So we have one merchant we work with is in actually all these sales channels. They're on Amazon, they have their own .com, and they have about 60 retail locations across the US. And what's been interesting is as they've had to close down those retail locations, really understanding the impact on digital. What has that location close done to their e-commerce? They've actually been able to basically retain about 90% of their total sales because a lot of that retail sales shifted to digital. And so as you kind of rethink that strategy, what is that strategy going to be post-COVID for that retail? Does it change from I'm actually trying to sell to something else? And what's interesting about that kind of shift in sort of mindset is we're seeing more and more brands having to really think about their operational data, especially fulfillment and delivery. So we've seen things taking longer to get delivered by UPS and USPS and FedEx, and prices for merchants going up to deliver, and sort of the capacity constraints those platforms are having. And yet we all as consumers have this expectation of same day, 1 day, 2 day delivery because of Amazon having a great experience. And so we know that a bad delivery or fulfillment experience has on long-term consumer lifetime value. And so really measuring the operational impact of those of your providers has become really critical, and playing them off against each other, finding out where they're strong and where they're weak. So as we kind of think about, so Chris, really appreciate kind of your insight. Wanted to ask you sort of some specific questions into some different areas. So if you think about, you know, sort of the larger brands, those that are whole, or those that are really sort of that wholesale, because you talked about how many wholesale companies were caught off guard. You know, how do you think about wholesale-centric brands and how they really need to shift as this kind of digital pace shift to digital has quickened?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's one of the key agenda for these very wholesale-centric businesses. And I think one of the key message that I think they need to accept is the fact that I think we're now living in a world where digital is such a critical component of everything we do, like the way we live, work, whatever. I mean, from healthcare to entertainment to whatever it might be. And you see this in terms of what happened during COVID. So I think this kind of concept, Dan, of digital first is really, really important. And what I mean by digital first is, what can we learn from those brands who are digital native, right? And what can wholesale-centric brands really kind of learn and adopt from those successful digital first, digital native brands? And you know, a few items kind of come to mind. First is, and I kind of mentioned this earlier in terms of this whole kind of soulful connection between the brand and the consumer. I think the successful digital native brands have done a remarkable job of creating a brand story that differentiates and resonates passionately with their most important consumers. So they've done that better than anybody else, I think. And more importantly, I think they also understand how the consumer is engaging with you across the entire kind of touch point, whether it's service, whether it's physical, whether it's digital, whether it's service, like you kind of pointed out, like all that operational delivery aspect of it, which is very, very important. They've done a fantastic job of being able to kind of look at that holistically and really understand, you know, what the whole journey experience might be. The other piece, I think, as I mentioned earlier, that speed and agility is a very advantageous. And you know, one of the issues that I kind of see with these wholesale-centric businesses is their operational timetable, whether it's product development, whether it's marketing, is so driven off of the wholesale retail calendar, right? So it's not uncommon for these brands to have like an 18-month long lead time in creating new products and getting that into the retailer, into the shelf. And that is a really, really, really long time when you think about it. So, you know, if you have the ability to actually conceive and deliver a product within 4 weeks, why can't you actually do the entire operation much faster, right? Instead of 18 months. So, you know, I think, you know, one of the, I think the key learning here is, like, you know, when you think digital first, stay far out and start thinking about the impact in terms of how you could actually change the way you do business, not beholden to how the wholesale retail timeline may actually be working. And finally, I think as you pointed out, how do you use data in terms of how you inform what you do is so important, right? And I think all the examples you kind of laid out, especially now how the operational store synergistic way of kind of thinking about whether it's delivery, the service, after service experience, a lot of brands dissatisfied consumers during COVID-19. I'm sure you kind of had experience. I have some horrible experiences taking delivery. It never shows up. And, you know, I think that's a very bad brand impacting experience. And I think a lot of brands now realizing they have to really nail their entire end-to-end kind of experiences. So yeah, so that's a very important, I think, some of the key, what I call digital first learning that I'm kind of sharing with the brand today.
And Chris, so the other area that we've seen really impacted are retailers, those that don't have a large digital presence. So as you've talked to, and in your experience with those, as I know you talk to and work with a lot of merchants that are in that space, how do these it's really more about the customer, and the customer behaviors have changed. What are you telling these retailers that haven't built that large digital presence to do in face of these behavioral changes that customers have now taken on?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I mean, I think this whole kind of a COVID-19 really not only amplified, but it's accelerated the need to really start adopting digital into their business strategy, right? So, and I think you're right. I think a lot of retail, the physical retail operations, kind of basically took digital as kind of lip service, right? They did dabbled in digital, but they really put much emphasis into it, and they still focused on operating their stores. I think now these retailers have to basically understand they have to be digital, right? They have to embrace digital as a core growth strategy. So I think that's really one of the most important, I think, message. However, I think the important thing here is, unlike a digital pure play, digital native brands, these what I call now multi-presence or omni-channel businesses have something going for them, which is retail presence, right? The physical store presence. And the question is, okay, how can you actually make them to be advantageous, strategically advantageous asset to your entire business? So obviously, buy online, pick up in the store, which has actually been now I think almost 15 years in making, and now finally a lot of the retailers are now taking that on as a key feature to their service offering. One of the businesses that I advise on was able to actually execute buy online, pick up in store during COVID-19, and for those that couldn't operate stores, they actually did curbside pickup, and they've been able to shift that overnight to actually kind of drive that, which has been a huge growth driver for them. So I think that's really a key way of kind of thinking about it is, hey, figure out a way to actually make your physical store presence an asset to your entire value proposition. And service is a very, very important key to that. The other piece, I think, is digital is more than just e-commerce, right? So it's not just about selling products on your online store. It's really about creating digital experiences that could be factored into your product, service delivery. Digital engagement could be a very powerful loyalty tool. Could be an excellent research tool to kind of understand what kind of product is going to be selling. You should be using your .com as a way to test out new products, new merchandise, new category, new strategies. And the other, one of the big news we just saw, I think this week, is Lululemon acquiring a digital engagement product called Mirror, which if you're able to do kind of watch yourself in a interactive display at home doing exercise. I think kind of some of the larger brands are investing into those digital tools to kind of create a more symbiotic ecosystem in terms of what they can deliver. And then finally, this is also my kind of belief that as we think about that soulful connection between the brand and the consumer, your employees could be a very, very powerful asset in terms of activating that soulful connection with the consumer, right? So having these the employees in a store that could actually create that kind of a great one-to-one relationship with your customer is very, very important. And how you think about employee as an asset and how you use them as your marketing, but more importantly, service and relationship driving, loyalty driving experiences, I think is something that you have, these businesses have, that a .com pure play doesn't. And as I also see that's a huge, huge asset they should be able to take advantage of.
Thanks, Chris. So lastly, I'll kind of just chat a little bit about sort of those e-commerce brands that are looking to go omni-channel.
So Dan, for those kind of e-commerce brands that you work with, who want to actually go omni-channel, right? So they want to go into physical stores. We come to amplify the whole kind of holistic omni-channel experience. What are you kind of seeing, hearing for these brands?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So it's pretty interesting what's going on with brands, with merchants. So most of our merchants, they're all 100% digital, or at least have started natively digital. And over the last couple of years, a couple of them have started to open up that retail location, recognizing that what they need is really to let people experience the brand. That's still the one challenge that you have a little bit with just a strict online space. And so what I think you're going to see is a lot of pressure in these retail locations as some close. There's going to be bankruptcies. You're going to see wholesale channels kind of consolidate. We're already seeing the Targets and the Walmarts of the world being kind of the winners in this new spaces. That's where people are looking to buy. And so this, coupled with bankruptcies and the impact on REITs and landlords, is really going to give smaller brands the ability to open physical stores. But as you said, it's got to be really about the experience side, less about going in and shopping and more about things like curbside delivery, or being able to pick up, or being able to go in and take a look at something that some of the newer brands have been able to do for quite some time. And then also, we're going to see a huge shift towards, the marketplaces, but not really Amazon, more, I think, to these other ones like Target.com and like Walmart. So their strategy is also, how do I not just sell products that I have, but how do I sell products that other people are able to supply to become more of an ecosystem? And I think that's going to be huge. So as we think about, as I said earlier, that Shopify announcement with Walmart.com, I expect to see those continue, especially on the Shopify side, to continue giving brands and merchants the ability to make their products available everywhere so that consumers can easily find them. Chris, so wanted to say thanks a lot for being part of this. If you can just tell us briefly where, if people want to connect with you, how they can connect with you.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. It was fun being with you today, and it was fun dialogue. So yeah, you can reach me on my website. It's c5advisory.com, c5advisory.com.
And great. And for those of you wanting to check out Daasity, we are partner closely with Looker to help you become data-driven for those direct-to-consumer brands. And you can find us at Daasity.com, and then always go and check out Looker.com. Very excited to be partnering with them. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a great day.